para formar e pôr em ação fisioterapeutas de excelência nas nossas UTIs, está entrando no ar mais um episódio do nosso podcast UTI em Forma e Ação. Eu sou Saint-Clair Bernardes, você me encontra lá no Instagram, no @Saint-Clair Bernardes.
Olá pessoal, sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Eu sou a Débora, fisioterapeuta intensivista. Você pode me encontrar no @movimento_UTI. E juntos, como a gente já falou no episódio passado, você nos encontra aqui na sua plataforma preferida há 2 anos. Pois é, se você não assistiu o episódio passado,
2
você
anos, é
está
muito
sabendo
tempo, hein?
agora que já faz 2 anos que a gente está aqui, né? Desde aquela nossa ideia inicial, nos mantemos aqui firmes e fortes, basicamente toda semana, por 2 anos, né? E com um olhar lá na frente, né, Saint-Clair? De nos mantermos mais um bom tempo aqui, né? Porque a gente tem muito assunto, muita coisa para falar, muita gente boa para vir aqui compartilhar com a gente. E aí, pensando, né,
Deixa eu colocar aqui, Débora, que cada vez mais a gente entendendo e percebendo, né, o quanto tem de espaço na nossa profissão para que a gente converse mais, para que a gente discuta mais, para que a gente se aprofunde em assuntos técnicos, em assuntos não técnicos. Então, a nossa formação, ela é cada vez melhor, eu acredito, mas também existem muitas lacunas que precisam ser discutidas. E esse podcast surgiu dessa ideia, e eu acho que agora a gente pode falar, a cada ano que passa, olha que quanto tempo, a cada ano que passa, eu acho que a gente tem mais a certeza de que esse espaço existe. Então, venham, continuem, fiquem aqui com a gente, chamem colegas, porque esse é o nosso propósito aqui dentro. Falando em propósito, diga aí o que você tem a dizer.
Então, falando nisso, né, a gente separou esse mês, né, para a gente, cada episódio, trazer um pouco do que é o nosso propósito, do que são os nossos pilares, né? E aí a gente está muito fundamentado aqui, né, na prática da evidência científica, né, no cuidado centrado no paciente e em fazer a nossa profissão caminhar, né? Informar e pôr em ação fisioterapeutas de excelência para que a nossa profissão siga um rumo legal, né, e cresça cada vez mais. E aí, para cumprir isso, né, esse mês de aniversário a gente vai tentar não, a gente vai, né, cobrir cada um desses pilares aí. E no de hoje, um episódio extremamente especial, a gente vai trazer aí o pilar da evidência científica para a gente. Então, a gente tem uma convidada super especial. Quem está aí lendo os papers, né, vai reconhecer, porque ela tem publicado cada vez mais, né? O ano passado eu estive em Belfast, na Conferência Europeia, e ela foi o centro das atenções ali, ela deu uma palestra sensacional, um overview ali da reabilitação, e foi muito legal. E aí a gente trouxe ela para falar com a gente, né? Para falar com todo mundo aqui do Brasil, né? Para quem às vezes não pode ir para esses congressos lá fora, né? E participar dessas conversas lá, a gente traz aqui, né? Ela é mais uma das convidados internacionais, né? Que você que acompanha nosso podcast aqui no Brasil tem a oportunidade de ouvir, né? Sem precisar sair da sua casa, sem precisar pagar em euro um congresso, enfim, porque a gente traz até vocês, né? Então, a nossa convidada desse episódio é a Sabrina Eggmann. Aproveitem muito, né, Saint-Clair? Aproveitem muito, muito a conversa, aproveitem muito para ler os papers delas também. E é isso, aproveitem que a gente cada vez mais traz convidados nacionais e internacionais para fazer a gente crescer cada vez mais na nossa profissão, né?
Isso aí. Aproveitem, usem as legendas ou então o áudio, dependendo da sua preferência, tá bom? A gente vai dar continuidade a partir daí em inglês o nosso episódio e a gente espera que seja muito produtivo para todos. Vem com a gente.
Hello everyone. Today we have a new episode in our podcast and with Saint-Clair and with Sabrina. Sabrina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for coming to our podcast. We are very happy with your presence with us. And could you introduce yourself for everyone, please?
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning for me, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Sabrina. I'm a physiotherapist from Switzerland, I work clinical since almost 20 years. So I still love what I'm doing. I'm also doing research, so I'm what you call like a clinical academic physiotherapist. I research mostly training in the ICU. I think we will research that, or we will talk about this a bit later. I'm currently in Australia, though. For 1 year, I'm doing a postdoc here at the Australian and New Zealand.
Thank you, Sabrina, for participating here with us. It's an honor to have you here. And we are going to start our conversation talking about these points that you showed us about your research and about what we actually do in the ICU. I would like you to tell the people, what do you think that it's the key points for the physical therapists nowadays to work in the ICU and to promote good rehabilitation? What's the key? What are the key points that we need to decide our interventions and to make sure we give good rehabilitation for the critical care patients?
Well, as you put it now, already to give good rehabilitation, I think it's not an option anymore not to provide any sort of rehabilitation. That's already the first key point. We must provide something, but then, of course, it's difficult to provide. What should we provide? And here, my key point, highest key point is probably get to know your patients. Get to really, really, really know them. What do they like? Also, well, of course, you need to know their history, their critical illness. You need to know all the precautions, but you also need to know what they like, how you get them motivated, how they show fatigue and exhaustion. You need to know when you can maybe push a little and motivate a little, and maybe sometimes when it's just time to do a break. So I think the most important thing is get to know your patient.
Can I ask you a personal question, but related to work, of course? And how do you do that actually? When you get inside an ICU, how do you get to know your patient? Is it conversation with the patient or with the family, or do you spend a lot of time doing that, or reading the medical records? How do you get to really know your patient?
Good question, actually, because it doesn't go from one day to the next, right? It needs time. So I guess it helps if you have a constant physiotherapist or maybe a team. What we often do is like that two physios share a patient. So it's always one or the other going to the patient. And if you go there several times, then of course you get to know them automatically. At the beginning, yes, it is mostly knowing about the patient's medical history, reading up about their electronic records. Maybe if family is there, I always try to talk a bit to them, just get to know them a bit. Did they like to move? Did they go out gardening? Did they have any problems with any joints? Often they're not in the medical record. So, but you're right, it needs time. It doesn't go from one day to the next, and it also needs it needs a little commitment. And you said it's a personal question. Because yes, it takes you personally. You need to give something from yourself, I guess.
And about the prescription, I was on a European conference the last year at Belfast, and you talk about this. Now, what we have in papers about the prescription, the rehabilitation topics, time, duration, and the other things about this. What do you talk about this?
I guess it's good to look a bit like you do in sports. So in terms of Swiss sports, Roger Federer is not training the same as the boxing, for example, us. Or even if you look at the Olympics, probably each one has a different training regime, right? And our patients are no different, so we need to train them differently. So the question is, we need to train them. That's not the question anymore, I think, because every trial that has a control group with no training is vastly superior to, so the training is vastly superior to no training. So the question is just how should we train? And so if you look at the prescription, usually you look at the FIT criteria, which is frequency, intensity, time and type and time or timing. So you need to look at the literature, I think, in these kind of terms. And if you look at frequency, there is a last systematic and a review and meta-analysis from WAC. It was published in Critical Care Medicine. It included 5,300 patients. And they did, of course, the overall meta-analysis, but they also looked at frequency and type, which was interesting. So this was a subgroup analysis. And they found that low dose, or if you compared like a high dose with a low dose, the intervention was more effective. And low dose was defined as less than 5 days. So I think we should say that you need at least 5 days per week. But of course, this is still very preliminary. But from this study, I would say, yes, aim for 5 days per week. And they also looked at type of exercise. And this is consistent with another systematic review, also, I think, in Critical Care Medicine from Baldau et al. And they also found that functional exercises are more effective. So we have already answered 2 questions of the FIT criteria. So it's frequency, with maybe more than 5 days per week. And type, it's functional. And with functional, I mainly mean it's tasks that the patients need to do, activities of daily living, like sitting up or standing or balance activity or washing the face. So these type of things. So if you look at frequency, we also in our study we did a randomized controlled trial, and we had over 700 physiotherapy sessions where we had physiological values for every 2 minutes. So it was median values for every 2 minutes, and there we did a very large statistical analysis, thanks to a statistician also, because it was a very, very large data set. And interestingly, we found that the cardiorespiratory reaction, it was a bit less if you did a longer session. So we thought that if you want to really stimulate it, you probably rather do a shorter session and instead multiple sessions per day. So this would stimulate, because the cardiorespiratory response is also wanted. Sometimes it's an adverse event, sometimes it's wanted with training. So we really need to balance this. But I think at the moment, short and more often, so at least 5 days per week, shorter and more often, and whenever possible, functional exercises. In this study, we
can I ask you just one thing about frequency before? And do you think that's worth to split the session during the day, like several times with low minutes, with short minutes?
Yes, I think so. Like in my practice. So we sit the patient up for the first time. They like it. They want to sit still, or sit a bit longer. And but after 5 minutes, I see like that their hair gets tired. Yeah, they do not sit well anymore. I just hold a bit more.
Anymore.
Yeah, then I say no, it's time to take a break. And then I lie down and they sleep for 1 hour. That's a clear sign that they need a break. So you have a qualitative movement that is less. So if you go to the gym and you do 20 times, and you can do the 20 times with good quality, maybe it's time to increase the weight. If the quality is not good anymore, then maybe you have too high, the weight is too high. So I think it's the same a bit. If the quality is not good anymore, it's time to take a break. And then if the patient needs 1 hour, really clear high time to take a break, and maybe rather go twice in a day instead of one time very long. Really also saw that in our study, because when people were sitting and up, so to higher levels, they needed longer to recover. So until the cardiorespiratory parameters went back to baseline, it needed much longer. So I think it's not enough to say we need to train. we also need to rest them after.
And that is a challenge to decide that time of rest and to get the feeling when it's the real time. And I'm asking about that because here in Brazil, we have a kind of intervention and physical therapy work shift that we stay 24 hours a day in the ICU because we also manage mechanical ventilation. We also do the respiratory and mechanical ventilation and oxygen therapy. So people get the same professional deals with mechanical ventilation and it's responsible for prescribing and getting the patient to exercise. And then people here have the habit to see the patient 7 times a week and 2 to 3 times a day. But sometimes I get that feeling that we stay for 20 minutes, 30 minutes with the patient, and we don't have the rest time. And so we got the patient exhausted. And then the other day, it's pretty much harder to achieve higher levels of mobility. And that's our reality here. I know that we have some works about 5 or 7 days, and especially I think in one of your works, you say that the patient, they do exercise 5 days a week. And if they have needs, for example, to get out of the mechanical ventilation, then you have the physical therapists, you can do it 7 times a week. But about the intensity, you said that the higher the intensity, the longer we need to rest. Do you think that we are going to get somewhere that we can measure the intensity, or is just for the patient's report about extension, and how we can measure and prescribe intensity of their exercise?
First of all, it's great that you're there for 24/7. It's really nice, and I think it helps to get to know the patient. Yeah. But then also, of course, listening. So not just get them up if you can, but also see, is it really the best state? I think that's important. So your question, can we measure intensity?
Yeah.
Yes, I guess. Well, if you look at healthy recommendations, it would be like my own exertion, like a Borg scale. And it's very difficult in critically ill patients. They usually have difficulty to say, even if it was the muscles, and if it was a certain thing that exhausted them, they're just like overall exhausted. What we found is that, like, one of the gold standards would, of course, be oxygen consumption. But then you need indirect calorimetry. And what we found, because we had indirect calorimetry during our physio sessions, we found that a good substitute parameter, which is on every ventilator, is minute ventilation. Minute ventilation volume actually increase very well, correlates very well with oxygen consumption. And I think we've all seen it at the beginning. Sit up, it increases very much. Patient is exhausted, and then it goes slowly down.
At the beginning of this exercise.
Yes, but sometimes it doesn't go down again. So it's just a surrogate parameter that we should maybe use more often, like in terms of prescription. And of course, it's also something we can tweak. We usually like to first keep the patient working, and then if it's too much, then do the machines only. But sometimes, if you know already it's going to be too much for the patient and the machine needs to help a bit more, so you can adjust the settings. But I think intensity is probably best measured with minute ventilation. And the thing I told before, like, it's a very simple thing, but a quality of movement. The head getting heavier. Like, it's like in the gym. We also do this, and I think we physios are very, very good at judging quality of movement. And maybe sometimes we just say it's a stomach feel, but I think we see that the patient is tired.
And about population, specific population, you have published a paper with COVID-19 patients and level of mobility with these patients. Do you think that the next steps about the researches and we need to look for the specific populations when we talk about the prescription, the rehabilitation?
Yes, of course, population is important in terms that it defines again, like individual who might be sicker or whose response to exercise is not behaving as expected. So yes, COVID-19, of course, they often behaved like we did not expect them, or they reacted more severely to exercise. We actually in our cardiorespiratory response analysis, we also found that sicker patients react more heavily. So it's always a good thing for patients with ARDS or multi-organ failure. They might react a bit more heavily. Also obese patients and elderly patients. So here I think it's good if we're a bit more cautious. And this is also in line with the recent paper published by the team investigators, the team trial with 750 participants. They actually found that patients with diabetes was mostly the reason for adverse events, and that patients with diabetes alleviated a positive effect of high intensity exercise. They compared high intensity to low intensity, right? And it was like high intensity, there was a signal for harm, low intensity was good. So now at least we have, in terms of intensity, we have in here it must say, don't go above, don't go below. And this was 8 minutes active, and this was 20 minutes active. So in here, an active, that's
at the highest level of mobility until the patient got exhausted.
Yes. So that's really a lot. So that is here somewhere is probably our correct intensity. And they found that with patients for diabetes, here is too dangerous. So better down here. For the others, even have been a benefit up there. So yes, populations are very important, but we do need more studies on this.
Alison, you talked about this paper, COVID-19 with COVID-19 patients in the other podcast, and you talk about the importance of culture, the team, and the culture of the ICU. Can you talk more, a little bit more with us? What do you think about the team and the culture of the ICU when we talk about the rehabilitation?
Yeah, well, in the COVID pandemic in Switzerland, like when it hit, we were very close to Italy. So I think we would not have managed to mobilize these patients if we haven't had a culture beforehand. So like it was normal to mobilize patients. So that's why I think a culture, or especially for this, for the COVID pandemic, when everyone or the workload was so high, I think it would have been prioritized if there wouldn't have been a culture. And with teamwork, I mean, it's not only the physios that mobilize patients, nurses are also very important. And actually, most studies, they mobilize more patients. What is interesting is physios, and here we come back, so why physios are also necessary, because they go more precise. So they go maybe to higher levels, they have better targeted intensity, they maybe watch more for fatigue than nurses do. So here it's again, we complement each other very well, and that's why I think it really is team work. But of course, it would also be nice if occupational therapists are included. I still have my nice picture of a patient during the COVID pandemic. They were sitting on the edge of the bed with the ECMO machine and doing Sudoku. So like,
Yeah,
it was nice.
it's great to hear you say that. We had a congress here in Brazil. It's the biggest congress about physical therapy ICU, and me and Deborah shared a lecture about what we have learned from COVID. And Deborah talked about this. When you have the culture and rehabilitation for the patients, it's not too hard to do because you have the culture. But if you don't have, like you said, when things started in Italy or Australia, and the first papers, and not papers, but the first recommendations, they were a little scared, and they would say, well, wait a little, don't try to move and rehab these patients. And when the first wave got over, we understood that kind of patient, he really needed rehabilitation. They were really impacted for the ICU, and they need to rehabilitation. And what do you think, Sabrina, are good strategies to make this culture of the ICU better? To make people get together and work, just like you said, and the nurses and the OTs and the PTs, how do we get to everybody work together toward mobilization culture?
I think it's these good examples that we all have in mind, right? Like, just the one patient I said, or you have your examples and I have mine. It's like, they're like in the head, and they were such a good experience. And it's a good experience for everyone. It was like the doctor who helped me, the nurse, for the patient, and for the physio. And I think we need to collect these good experiences. And then we need to share them. And like, oh, we were a bit scared at the beginning, but then we went very slow. And it was such a good thing. The patient was smiling and he was waving to everyone. Um, and this needs to be shared. And then we try with the next patient. So I usually don't go and say, oh, did you mobilize? You didn't do it well. Or like, so I usually try this first. And then you build up. And I think it's positive experiences. And of course, it needs leadership and all these studies that also recommend the quality improvements projects, like goal setting, like interprofessional rounds. It needs all these things, but it needs like shared positive experiences. And I think it also helps if patients come back to the ICU. So if you see that you had an effect, and that the science, also the hard work for mobilizing was worth it, probably.
And scientific evidence that we have nowadays, what's your look about it? Do you think that you have told about a lot of papers here, but do you think we have a lot to achieve about rehabilitation in the ICU? Do you think we are in the right way? Our research are doing great and going to the correct path to answer our biggest questions?
And what is the future?
Yeah.
Sorry?
What's the future?
Well, I think we are on the right track. We have to recognize the problem, and we have found some sort of intervention, rehabilitation that seems to address at least parts of the problem. We have seen that no physio or no exercise compared to exercise is a must benefit. But as I said, we still have a lot in between. So we see if that's a huge step. We know where the bottom line is. So now we need to find more studies like what type, what intervention is best, like how frequent, how often, how long, when did we start? So there's still a lot of answers, questions or answers that we need to look for. Yeah, but I think I'm still convinced that the intervention is worth it, and that we are on the right track, and that this will be continued for the future. I hope that it will also be part of a culture where ICU is maybe more humane and not patients that are deeply sedated anymore, so that we really get to know them and try to help them to leave the ICU as fast as possible.
Until we finish this conversation, I would like you one more question. In the last week I read your editorial about the paper of Perm, physical therapy in the ICU practice makes perfect, about the competence, the physiotherapists in ICU, knowledge, skill, capability, behavior. What do you think about this? What is the key competences, and what is the competence for physical therapies in ICU and for rehabilitation critical patients?
So, well, this paper was like an editorial or a review of a newly published competency skill work. And I think all these competencies that this tool included, so like knowledge about ICU devices, critical illnesses. So this is all very, very important. But sometimes you have, I think, if you have all studied this in theory and then start at the bedside with the patient, I think you forgot maybe the most important thing, like that this is a human being. So I think this is also important, and this is what you learn with the patients. And I think you cannot really learn it from theory. So you have to listen to patients and take into account their feedback. And I mean, all I've learned, I mean, I've read so many studies and books, and I've done courses and everything, but most I've learned from patients. Just to listen to them, and they can teach a lot. Like, oh, this was really good that you pushed me here, and oh no, you have said anything, I wouldn't have done it. So all these, and we need to listen and learn, and I think that's not really a competency we can learn from books. So we need to use clinical practice also, but mentors are probably important too.
Yeah,
I wouldn't make an extra question about it, because me and Deborah, we get in touch with students at graduation for physiotherapy, and you told something really important, but usually we get to do that while we are working, especially to get this time to know the patient, to talk to the patient, to get to know his history or her history. And do you think, what do you think that we need to put inside graduation to make better physical therapists before they get to the ICU?
They need to learn all these skills. They do, because otherwise it's also very dangerous if you do not understand a tube, and if you do not understand the mechanical ventilation, and if you do not understand what sepsis is or a shock. It is very, very important to have this knowledge. And also they need the tools on they need to learn the tools on recognizing weakness or fatigue, like exhaustion. So they all need the tools we are teaching in physiotherapy schools. We just think sometimes, like with medical schools, we are maybe forgetting to say that also listen to patients.
That's really great. I think it's really important to talk about it, because we get to train people before they get to the ICU and after they get to the ICU. And in this editorial, you talk about, you and the other author talk about the knowledge and the skills, and you say about you got to know the disease, you got to know the impact of the organ failure, you got to know the rehabilitation activities you're going to do, but this brings to what's better to train, educate these people. And the podcast conversation, it's really good, and to hear you say about it, it's like we know we got to do rehabilitation with this patient. That's no longer a question. It's no longer a question if we make rehabilitation in the ICU. It's especially how we get to make better rehabilitation with the patients instead of rehabilitation. And I think that's important also, not to skip. Like, we have rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is good. Now we're going to do a lot of new interventions, and that do not bring the specificity of the rehabilitation. So when you give the example of the high intensity and the low intensity, I think we need to work a lot inside that to improve the physical therapy. And just to end this episode, Sabrina, I would like to say that it's really good and also really important to have you here in the podcast, because we have a lot of researchers in physical therapy and who really deals with and study and likes rehabilitation for critical care patients. It probably has gotten to one of your papers and one of your colleagues and your team's productions. So it's really important for us to have you here, because you can share your view of what's physical therapy and what do we need as professionals to get better ways to improve rehabilitation. So thank you very much for your time here with us. It's really important. It was an honor to talk to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. It's a pleasure for us. We have read your papers and in Brazil and physical therapies in Brazil, and it's very special for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks for being here with us until the end, and we hope to get to see everybody in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.